Ladies and gentlemen, one very short comment to the movie. I was there in Mauthausen-Gusen. I was watching with my own eyes this brilliant project. I saw the outcome, the impact on young people. It was amazing. And that's why I would like to ask you once again for a round of applause for creators, organizers, and especially young participants. And one of these participants in Sound in the Silence last year in Kaunas was Alexandra Mészáros. Alexandra, what was your personal impact in Kaunas last year?
Where shall I start? So I think this movie is really great, first insight, but there are many more aspects of this project which you can't even show in a film like this, because imagine meeting another 20 students from all around Europe for the very first time and working together with them for a whole week, when this is the only reality you are in. So that becomes the most important thing in your life, to bring this performance together. And of course it's not only about building a living memory of the place, but also about building a really strong community between these students.
And do you see any changes inside of you after this project?
Yes, many projects. I think Dan also mentioned it in the film, that we are really different after we leave this project, because beforehand we don't really know what to expect. And because it's such a unique project that we can't really compare it to any former experience of ours. But we become more sensitive and open to these harder parts of history, and I think we understand it now better, why we should lay a larger emphasis to not only learn the pure facts, but really make history become a part of ourselves, and to involve ourselves in the learning and the remembrance of history.
Dan Wolf, mentioned already many times, is artistic director of Sound in the Silent project. I would even say spiritus movens of this project. Dan, in this movie, you said something like this: when young people are living the project Sound in the Silence, there is something different about them than they arrived. Please try to describe this difference more precisely. This difference mentioned also by Alexandra.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Welcome, everyone. I use the word transformational quite a bit, this idea of starting in one place and ending in a new place. When the students arrive, they're quite skeptical. They've never heard of working in a memorial site and using art and history, and they really don't know what the final presentation is going to look like. But by going through this path, there's a sense of openness that happens. They open up to themselves. They open up to history. I mean, these are teenagers, right? They're showing up they've never been to a place, or if they've been to a place like this before, they think they know it already and you don't need to tell me. But the process of learning the history and working with artists and being together makes them think in new ways. They share their perspectives. They learn about the different perspectives of the different nationalities. They create deep international connections with people that maybe they never thought that they could be friends with. They have new reflections on themselves and on their nationality and the other nationalities. And I think most importantly is we'll never change the history of these places. We can only learn about them, and by being there together, we add a new layer of history, and it's one of openness and connectivity and empathy and listening and sharing and understanding, which is something that day by day is more valuable in this world than ever before.
You see, this project, Sound in the Silent, is the best starting point for our discussion. I would like now to go on to the core of our discussion. It was already mentioned before by many speakers that we are all shocked by current events in our world. You can please give me presentation. You all know these photos. When you looked, yes, I will describe it, or nearly all of you. It's Israel. On the 7th of October, a young lady is running away from Hamas terrorists during a music festival close to borders of the Gaza Strip. When we have a look on such an image, we want to say, no, we do not learn from history. There are more photos that are more horrible. And I was thinking for a long time which pictures I should choose. But let me make this picture more meaningful, okay? On her face, I see that she's scared, that she's running, and I'm trying to give you the context of this photo. Her friends, other participants of this music festival, have already been kidnapped, tortured, beaten up, raped, or murdered. But let me make this picture more meaningful. You know this picture?
It's better.
I wouldn't use this word. But it's summer 1941. The city of Lviv. Pogrom in Lviv. The pogrom was triggered by the Germans who entered the city and by Ukrainian nationalists. Soon, some local residents, some Ukrainians and some Poles, joined the murderers and took part in the massacre. In those days, the Germans also executed Polish intelligentsia in the city of Lviv, especially professors from the University of Lviv. For me, it's one of the most important images in the history of the Second World War. Look at the background of this photo. You see this little boy. He looks like one of my two sons playing after school. He's running, holding a long stick in his hand. This woman, brutally beaten up, could be his mother. When we saw such images, the question is, Do we learn from history or not? But there are more images in our world. The city of Mariupol, eastern Ukraine, completely destroyed. Why? Because Vladimir Putin is convinced that Ukraine is part of the zone of interest, of his zone of interest. Because Ukrainians want to build democratic, tolerant, and European in spirit country. Do we learn from history? Today in Europe, we have a full-scale war with innocent civilians suffering each day and war crimes committed. But let me show you last photos. It is Marszałkowska Street in Warsaw, in my home city, burning in 1944. The city was completely destroyed by the Germans. Even now, in the heart of the city, you can see many traces of war and the destruction. So many years after the war. And the last image, the city which is surrounding us now, Berlin, 1945. And in this very city, in the same city, we now gather together as friends and allies to talk about how to build better future through history. So the answer for the question, do we ever learn from history? It's not simple. Or it is very simple. We learn from history if, first, we learn from history if we want to learn from history. It's the first condition sine qua non. Secondly, we learn from history if we treat history honestly, reliably, truthfully. Even when history is painful for us. We learn from history if we understand that sometimes history is black and white, and sometimes history is very complicated. We learn from history if we respect justice, also in historical context. But on the other hand, we don't use history as a stick to beat others with. And thirdly, we learn from history if we know how to do it. If we had an optimal plan and methods. It's very, very important because generations are changing. That's why I would like to divide our discussion into 3 rounds. Question for round number 1. What for? What are the goals of learning from history? What do we like to achieve? The second round, what? What topics, what elements of history should be in the center of learning from history, of our historical education? And the third round, how? Methods, the optimal methods to do it. So I would like to start the first round with Johannes Schraps, member of Bundestag. Johannes, nice to meet you as always. What is the main goal of historical education nowadays?
First of all, I would like to thank you very much as well for the invitation, especially as a member of the advisory board of the European Network on Remembrance and Solidarity. I'm very glad that we are going to meet in Berlin here and discussing these kind of issues, especially in these days. And you already mentioned, Marek, why it's so important, especially to talk about history and how we can learn from it in these days. And actually, if I may just make a small comment on the movie that we have seen as well, and to hear what Alexandra mentioned about her experiences in this workshop, in this project. Actually, it's very easy to feel this empowerment that brings this kind of workshop to you and also to the other participants in this movie. And I was asking myself, sitting there, if actually this panel is still necessary, because the movie already transported so many very good aspects of why it is important to deal with history and to talk about it, that I think this movie stands for itself already. But nevertheless, of course, it's important to talk about it. And of course, I will also answer your question, why it is necessary to do this. And I think one thing is meeting in places on site where things happened in the past. And as we could see on the pictures that you have shown, are happening in present as well, which is the past and the future. What we have to deal with in the future as well is so important, because if you read about it, it's something different as if you experience these things in place. We can see that in so many different places, also here in Berlin. For example, if I think about the former Stasi or former Soviet prison in Berlin-Hohenschönhausen, where there are still witnesses that are telling the students that are coming to this place to visit it from their own experiences, how it was being in that prison. But it won't be anymore like this for such a long time anymore. I had a very good event in my constituency with Esther Bejarano, also a Holocaust survivor, and I still have in mind, I still remember how impressive this was for all the young people that were visiting this kind of event.
Yeah, but I mean some respect for respect and
yeah.
some rules, otherwise we cannot continue like this.
How impressive this was
Yeah.
for young people to discuss with Holocaust survivors. And I mean, it was mentioned in the movie as well. And I think you could really feel how impressive it was for the participants of this workshop to talk with this Holocaust survivor in Kaunas about her own experiences. But we won't have this forever anymore, especially if we talk about the Second World War and about the Holocaust. And even more important is it that we find institutions, that we find ways how to transport this to the current generation. And as you mentioned, generations changes. Generations are not the same, and of course also the ways how to learn it, they change as well. And one thing is using, for example, and we will talk about this later as well, social media opportunities to transport what happened in the past and to transport what we should learn about. And I think the one outcome that should be there is democracy education, because dealing with the past, discussing about the past, what does it mean for our present and for the future, that means that you discuss democracy. You get in touch with different points of views from other people, and you have to take them into account. And that is democracy, because if you learn from other people's views, you have to take into account other opinions, and that is democracy. So learning democracy, democracy education, that is the outcome that we need, and that is the key point of dealing with history.
So we have the first key point, and the same question for Villano Qiriazi, representing Council of Europe, the Education Department. It's an honor to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
And let's face this question, this very general question.
Yeah, we have in the Council of Europe, from the point of view of our political organizations, we have been dealing with history education and history education programs since 1954, when the European Cultural Convention was signed by members that were members of the Council of Europe at the time. But the European Cultural Convention is still a very valid instrument, because one of the key elements of this European Cultural Convention is precisely how to use history or history teaching for reconciliation and for unity. So this would be the primary aim of the history teaching in the European context. Why this? Because the Council of Europe was founded after the Second World War, and then the slogan or the principle was, never again. And so for this, the reconciliation and unity of European countries was key to build Europe in peace. And then two elements are very relevant in this. One of the first conventions, together with the European Convention for Human Rights in the Council of Europe, is also the fact that language also as part of the identity, but also of each country and each nation, but also as part of this mutual understanding and between peoples of and nations of Europe. So both history and language teaching were seen as a precondition to build unity in Europe. And then later on, throughout all the years, several dimensions have been explored in the Intergovernmental Cooperation Program in the Council of Europe. One important element is very much linked to one of the key missions of education, which is the preparation of future citizens to act in an engaged way in community life and in society. So this is also another important element, and history educations play a vital role to form and to prepare active democratic citizens. Another element that is very much important for us is the question of values. 2 weeks ago, we had a ministerial session in Strasbourg, and the main topic that ministers discussed was the transformative power of education. And so when I saw the film, I immediately thought about this transformative power that education, either formal education in classroom, but most importantly nowadays, the non-formal education, but also the informal education that takes place through social media, etc., are key in transforming people, transforming lives, and also, in a way, ensuring a better future, a peaceful future for all of us. So this is another important element, the element of transformation, but also the element of values. We have, since 2016, in the Council of Europe, developed a framework of competencies that we call competencies for democratic culture. Democratic culture has become a key, let's say, objective for all our program of activities. And then those competencies are divided, there are 20 competencies divided in 4 clusters. And for the first time among all the competence framework that exists around the world, we have developed a specific cluster of competencies that are dedicated to values. And values, the first one is human dignity. As a major value, but also other values like respect for fundamental rights, etc., are key and are part of this history education program that we are developing. Nowadays. So I would say that these 3 elements are key objective for the work in the Council of Europe. And then since 2000, when we concluded a big project on teaching history of the 20th century, we launched also another important dimension in our work, that was the dimension of remembrance. And then as a key element to better understand the past, but also to prevent future crimes against humanity. And then when it comes to the questions, do we learn? I would say yes, we learn all the time. But
not always.
I mean, I think that we learn all the time. But the challenges that we are facing are different, and the rapid dynamics of societies and what happens either at local, national, or global level gives us, the impression that probably we don't learn, but we learn. And I'm very optimistic on the capacities of all of us to learn, but there are some preconditions. You mentioned some of them, but some other preconditions are that in addition to solidarity, I would say that we need all together to stay united around our values. And those values are human rights values and democratic principles. Otherwise, we cannot learn.
Thank you. Let me share also my own experience as secretary of the International Auschwitz Council since 2006. In recent years, I used to be a guide around Auschwitz for groups of young people once or twice a year, because I wanted to stay up to date with their mentality, with their way of thinking about the world, with their sensitivity. And I always tried to inspire young people to raise questions. I told them, do not be afraid, there are no stupid questions, do not be ashamed. And a dozen or so years ago, the standard question was, how could the perpetrators commit such atrocities? How could ordinary people listening to Mozart, having their own children, how could they murder innocent kids, adults, and elderly? But in recent years, however, and it's very interesting for me, the question has changed. The young people asked, how could they allow this? And when they speak of they mean prisoners. Why didn't they rebel? How was it possible? I would never allow this. Once a group of American students from one of universities asked the same question, and the guide, it was not me, started to explain. And suddenly one girl interrupted him and said, I do not understand anything. Where were their lawyers? So, you see, young people are very aware of their rights, and it's good, of their rights as citizens and human beings. But it's more and more difficult for them to imagine that someone could brutally deprive them these rights. And that's why I would say these young generations are even more in danger. Because very often when they have to face evil, brutality, violence and hate, they feel lost and helpless. What to do? What is the goal of historical education? The answer was for me in that movie. So Franziska Hübner, teacher from Germany, said, students need possibilities to be activated, to be empowered, to take their responsibilities and possibilities they already have, that should feel that they can change the world. And I think it's very important, because on the level of emotions, of awareness of rights, it's good. But, or better, but taking steps, act, change, it's the next thing.
I would first of all perhaps say a few words about what we have heard, because I think it's really necessary that we still make this very clear. I'm still a very young politician, just turned 40 this year. And I got elected first time to the German parliament with 34 years old in 2017. At that time, I was under the 5% of the youngest members of parliament. And it was not long ago that I attended such conferences, such workshops as Alexandra did as well, and as the young participants did as well. And actually, when I'm in schools talking to the pupils in schools, I tell them, leave your comfort zone, go to other countries in Europe, get to know other people all around Europe, because they have different views on certain things, and you need to know and you need to learn about that, because that is somehow overcoming your prejudices that you have, that are perhaps implemented in your way of thinking. These stereotypes are implemented in your way of thinking by former generations that perhaps made different experiences and worse and bad experiences as you perhaps do. And just if we bring people together, learning from each other, we can overcome these things. We had situations between Germany and France. We had situations between Germany and Poland. We had times where the people in these countries were not able to talk and to speak to each other. But people-to-people contacts are the key of knowing each other and overcoming all these prejudices that are there. And actually what happens, and that's what I tried to mention in the beginning as well, what happens at such conference, at such workshop, is that you learn democracy because you're dealing with its own fundaments, with the basic fundaments what democracy is. Expressing your own opinion, learning about other opinions, and trying to value them with each other. And that is what teacher Franziska Hübner mentioned in the movie. What is, from my point of view, this key element of what happens there is that you value democracy because it's important for our society. But democracy is not a self-evident thing. And that was the danger, actually, that was also expressed in the speeches in the beginning from our minister and also from all others that had speeches in the beginning, that there is a danger if you take people as too self-evident, or perhaps religious people would say as God-given. It is not. We have to work for it every day. And one part of working for it every day is bringing people together all over Europe, because then you're not having prejudices with others anymore. And I think this is one important thing. The one thing is people-by-people contacts. The other thing is talking about history at the sites of history. I have such a site in my constituency. I'm from Hamelin, small town south of Hanover in Lower Saxony. And perhaps you know the times in the 1930s, you know about the big events that Hitler started to bring the society in Germany behind himself. There are it's the 1st of May, where he made the Workers' Day to bring all the workers in the bigger cities behind himself. Then there are the party convention meetings in Nuremberg, where he brought behind himself his party members in the National Democratic Party, in the Nazi Party. And there were also the rural areas, which is my region, and the Bückeberg close to Hameln, where he had the harvest festivals every year. They called it Reichserntedankfest at that time. There were 1.3 million people every year standing at a hill which was planted in a way so that he can have a speech in front of 1.3 million people from the rural areas in Germany. Just 2 years ago, when I was already member of parliament, over 70 years after these things took place in my constituency, we finally took the decision to have a memorial site there and to inform people about what happened there. Because there were a lot of people saying, let's have grass about it, and let's not talk about it anymore. It's been so long ago, it went very well. But it was necessary and is necessary to have these kind of places, because if you read about things, if you read about a tiger or a lion, it's different as if you see it in a zoo or in free. It's different if you are in such places, and that's what we have to push. Because otherwise we won't learn about it anymore, because especially about the Second World War, we won't have that many people anymore that can talk about it because they experienced it themselves. I will make a stop here.
Thank you. Dan, could you... then could you share with us your own, I would say, global experience? Because as American, you are running projects, educational projects in European memory sites, very different sites. And from your point of view, what topics, what elements of history should be in the center when we want to face the challenges of the 21st century?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say that Sound in the Silence is the farthest thing from reenactment. Sound in the Silence is empowerment for young people, and with all due respect, including myself being in my 40s, you know, we messed this place up. We haven't learned anything. So I'm tired of listening to us. I actually don't want to hear from us anymore. I want to hear what the young people have to say. I want to empower them to tell us where they are in their lives, for them to understand that these things happen and continue to happen, and that it's really up to them if we want any change, because we sit around in rooms like this and just talk about it. And when we go to these places and you feel the history coming from the soil, and you watch the transformation that happens for all of us, not just the young people, but we learn stuff too, you are forever changed. And you have to place yourself in this continuum of history so that you can understand not only what happened, but what is possible. And yeah, I am from America, but this topic and this history is highly personal for me. I'm in America because of the Second World War. My grandparents fled the Nazis, survived in Shanghai. My mother's family went to Siberia and ended up, luckily, I'm like a dandelion flower that has been blown into the wind, where most of the seeds have died, but I was lucky because I landed in fertile soil and I grew. And 20 plus years ago, I sat across the table from what I considered the enemy, a German man from Hamburg who had traveled across the world to give me back my history. And I, at that point, was someone who was, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a famous actor. And because of this history, because of this meeting, because of this experience, when I was 25 years old, the entire course of my life changed. So I think it's incredibly important that we empower young people to understand not only what happened, but what is happening and what potentially could happen, both negatively, but hopefully positively. Someone like Alexandra is incredibly important because of the way that her mind was open, from the way that she brought her sensitivity and her intelligence and her power as a female in this world and her power as a citizen of her country to this project. I'm forever changed because of her. And I know everybody else in this project is also forever changed. So these are the important things, to not just talk about them, but to touch the ground and the soil and go through the actual hardship of engaging with each other and listening to each other and disagreeing with each other. And hopefully somewhere in our hearts, something opens up, because all of us are thinking with our heads way too much. And this project is about your heart and it's about your gut. And those three things coming together, in my opinion, give us the best chance for survival. So when someone tells me that this isn't that we need to reenact what happened in the past, no. That's over. What we need to do is be quiet and give space to young people so we can listen and learn from them.
Dan, thank you. Now I have no choice but have to give space to Alexandra. You have to tell us, representatives of Jurassic Park, what is important to young generation in historical education? What is important for you?
I think the most important thing for us when it comes to history education is to not only receive pure facts that we can separate ourselves from, because this is the traditional way of history teaching, that we go into the classroom, then receive some facts that we should memorize, and then we go home or we go to another class and we forget everything. And it would be important to not only hear, but only feel these things that happened, and that is so great in this project, that you got involved in history, so it becomes a part of you, and you can't separate yourself from these things, because you're in a place where you go in and you suddenly feel that a lot of things happen there, and you just can't separate yourself. You start thinking about it, you start feeling it, you feel the need to communicate your feelings with the others, to release this overwhelm of the feelings.
Thank you. I want to add something.
If I may add, and what is even more important, not just that you attend this workshop, but that you are here today talking about this, because all the people that are attending these kind of workshops, these kind of gatherings, talking about history, they are multipliers, spreading the word to others, because we won't reach everybody with such an audience here, for example, but we can spread the word. And just if there are enough people discussing this, spreading the word, and spreading empowerment as well, if you were self-empowered by such workshops, this can help really to reach enough people to have a stable majority of people supporting the values of democracy. And that's why I'm really glad to have you here sitting next to me and discussing these issues.
Alexandra, you touched very important issue. I would like to give you example from my own experience. In the beginning of the 90s, the most problem in my field of historical education seemed to be negationists. So people which were trying to convince others that there was no Holocaust on industrial scale. And in many countries of Europe, we invest huge amounts of money in education about Holocaust and Auschwitz. We have very good educational tools, school books. Education about Auschwitz and Holocaust is in many official programs, in educational systems, in many countries of Europe. During sessions of International Auschwitz Council, many experts from Europe, Israel, United States, and especially survivors, saw one thing. We invest huge amounts of money in learning facts. But anti-Semitism in many countries is growing, not diminishing. And, you know, it was shock for everybody. So many educational efforts. And anti-Semitism also among young people in many countries was growing. And it was the case. It was learning of pure facts. There was no connection between learning facts and, I would say, living due to values. There was no connection between them. And now we all are trying to change the course of this ship. We try to make it better. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So from my point of view, I mean, when I saw the film, I considered all these students as very privileged ones, because they are very, as you said, there are very few possibilities for a reduced number of students to go and visit such places, and in addition, not only to visit as passive visitors, they can go also with their parents, etc., but to go with other students together and interact, work, collaborate, and produce something, produce art, and then etc. So these are, I mean, immediately I thought, what a privilege to be, to be in such a situation, to learn history, not only through books and through facts and in the classroom, but also in the sites of remembrance, in sites where this, horrific things have happened, etc. So this is one thing. How we teach and how we learn history, and not only history, but also other subjects, is very important. In the Council, we decided to put the learners at the heart of our priorities for the next 10 years. What does it mean? This means that everything we should do should first consider the needs of the learners in the light of new dynamics, new challenges that learners are facing. So you said, we have backsliding of democracy, but you also underlined increase on anti-Semitism, but you have also Islamophobia, you have also the hate against migrants, other groups that are different from the so-called normal groups, etc., or the majority and minorities. So all these elements should be, in a way, part of the history education. So one is how we teach and learn history. So the role of authentic places is crucial. But the other one is also not only give the history of the big generals and the big, let's say, men in different nations, etc., but also give the history of families, of individuals, of normal people, etc. And so this history you find very easily in museums, in sites, and I brought also my children in April here in Berlin to visit the 2 or 3 museums, the new Jewish museum, but also the memorial of the Holocaust. And then in the memorial, you see the stories of families, you see the stories of normal people. And then when you discover and then you see what normal people went through, then you learn better. So we are trying to also underline throughout our programs also these elements, so that are not so often, let's say, represented in the history textbook, etc., etc. So you have the individuals, you have also marginalized groups like Roma people, for example. Recently, we have issued also a specific recommendation to member states with regard to the presentation of Roma history in curricula, in history curricula in our member states, but also the history of migration, the history of women, the history of LGBTI, etc. So all these groups should be more included as specific topics in the curricula of history in European countries.
So you mentioned the role of memory sites. It's very important, like in Auschwitz-Birkenau. But I would like to add one more thing. This man, Marian Turski, maybe some of you know him, survivor, Holocaust survivor, former Auschwitz prisoner. He held the famous speech on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the camp. And I would like to read a few sentences from this speech. Today, when I meet young people, I am aware that 75 years after the Second World War, they seem a bit fed up with this subject. The war, the Holocaust and Shoah and genocide. I understand them. So to you, young people, I promise I won't talk about my suffering. You won't hear stories from my experiences, my 2 death marches, or how I ended the war weighing 32 kilos at the brink of existence. I won't tell you about the worst thing, the tragedy of parting from loved ones when you have a sense of what awaits them after selection in Birkenau, what awaits them in the gas chambers. No, I won't talk about all that. With you, the generations of my daughter and my grandchildren, I want to talk about yourselves. I see that we have here with us the Austrian president, Mr. Alexander van der Bellen. Do you remember, Mr. President, when you invited me as well as the International Auschwitz Committee leadership and we discussed those times? At one point, you used the sentence, Auschwitz ist nicht vom Himmel gefallen. Auschwitz did not come out of the blue. Yes, that is absolutely right. And then Marian Turski used many examples, also from Berlin. For example, signs that appeared on the park benches in Berlin, Jews aren't allowed to sit on these benches. And he told young people how hatred is growing step by step. And he wanted them to see around them, to look for these small traces, really small traces of hatred, violence, intolerance, indifference, and to deal with it. I think this speech also shows us the way, how to deal with history, how to build the core of our historical education. Surely not only pure facts to memorize, but to build this emotional bridge between the past and nowadays, and to show this way like Marian Turski did. But it is also the question of methods. For example, digitalization, new technologies. It was also mentioned in the movie. For example, teacher from Croatia, Marek Zając, said, and she was right, students have much shorter attention span. Project-based learning is now the best way to engage young people. So the last round of our discussion is about methods. Which methods are the best? And I would like to start with Mr. Qiriazi.
Yeah, thank you. So when you talk about methods, we have been reflecting about methods for decades in the Council of Europe, not only in the Council, but also all the education European systems. I mean, they use a diversity of methods. But what we have been promoting, you know, in a specific way is the what we call multi-perspectivity in history teaching and history learning, which is the ability to consider facts from different perspectives, but also to express readiness to listen, to engage, and also acknowledge other perspectives, even divergent interpretations of the past. So, in that way, the history teaching and history education is considered as an open field for debate, and you don't give to students definite answers, but you engage also students in different with active pedagogies, you know, research projects, collaborative work, etc., in order to go further and then explore the multi-perspectivity. The film is also part of this multi-perspectivity approach because you take students from different cultures, different backgrounds, and group them together in order to produce something. So multi-perspectivity doesn't give one picture, but give a multicolored picture. And in that sense, the understanding of the past becomes even more important. And then at the same time, through multi-perspectivity and then comparing and collaborating and having these debates with the perspectives of the others, you also develop critical thinking, which is one of the key elements of the competencies that we need for all the students to have at the end of any education course. But of course, we are very aware that multi-perspectivity doesn't mean for us or is not synonymous with forms of relativism that seek to present all the positions as equally true, etc., etc. I mean, we have been facing this very recently, last year or even the recent years, with the Russian propaganda against Ukraine, and how history was also used or, I mean, mentioned as a justification for, starting this war against Ukraine. Then, at the same time, multi-perspectivity brings also other elements that are important in history teaching. When we talked about conditions just before, that brings also experiences of ordinary people under the discussions, and then create also the possibility to build empathy with when we understand better how the perspectives and how the understanding or the knowledge of other people or other groups perceive a given fact or a given event. So this multi-perspectivity is very much promoted by the Council of Europe, but nowadays we are also trying to promote further in order to create also conditions inside the formal education system, a more flexible and adaptable curricula. But for this, we need also teachers, and we need pre-service and in-service training for teachers, because teachers need support, need resources, and need also a lot of flexibility in the application of the curriculum, especially in those countries that have a very centralized curriculum, where teachers do not have the autonomy, to act or behave or change the course of learning of a subject based on the needs of the learners that they have in the classroom. Learners nowadays are not homogeneous learners. They come in the classroom with different backgrounds, from different culture, from different nationalities. Even you have also a lot of students that have different sexual orientations, etc.
National background.
So you need also to in a way, the teacher is trapped, especially for those that have a centralized system, between the requirements of a rigid curriculum and the needs of the learners. And then you have these clashes, and then the teacher is between. An unfortunate and also shocking, let's say, event this weekend in France was the killing of another teacher after the killing or assassination of a history teacher 3 years ago in Samuel Paty in France. And then the reaction of teachers during the ceremony of a prize that was organized following a collaborative project to give a prize to high school students that work together on a topic. Was also, what teachers were saying. Teachers were saying, we are left alone. We cannot, in a way, in 1 hour and a half that we have at our disposal every week to give all the competencies, the knowledge and the critical thinking to the students. So this also is a crucial problem that should be dealt appropriately in the future. One, element is also to create inside each school this climate of functioning as a democratic institutions where democracy is not only learned, where values are not only learned, but also practiced in a way in every subject and throughout the school life of our students.
Thank you. Dan, thanks God you are completely free in your activities, in your educational activities, and your starting point is always to hear what is important for young people. So tell us, what methods could touch their hearts, minds, and guts, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, listening is deeply important. Listening to them. I really agreed with what was just said around multi-perspectivity and this ability to have more than one point of view. This critical thinking skills, this ability to, I don't want to use the word inspire because I don't feel like I'm some great resource with my knowledge pouring it into the heads of the young people that I meet. I really think it's a dialectical two-way conversation where we're using the history as a starting point for a real conversation and a real discussion. And of course, I'm biased because I'm an artist. So I think that art is a very powerful medium for taking something that is very concrete, meaning the history, this happened, these facts, these dates, these locations, and and allowing some abstraction to happen, allowing some personal connection to happen, allowing some individual perspective to happen in the learning process. And in this way, it's it is truly democracy. I mean, I come from the theater, and I will say this in education too. I quite often think that theater and educational settings are dictatorships masquerading as democracies, where we have these stratuses and these levels of power that are there. And then we teach our kids and we tell our kids, well, go out and be democratic. Go out there and be good to other people and be equitable and find empathy with others. But we don't practice what we preach. So the more we create structures where it is really democratic, it's really circular, and it's a way that it's a shared learning experience where someone who has more experience and someone who has less experience can listen, can understand each other. And no matter if you're someone like me from the States or you're like Alexandra, we meet somewhere in the middle and we find something new that doesn't exist already. And I think this is really important for me. And this is the spirit and the methodology with which I learn the best, with which the idea from Sound in the Silence was born, and it's the spirit with which we keep alive to this very day, where in about 10 minutes, I'm going to meet the next group of young people and start our work together.
Thank you very much. So we have project-based learning, we have critical thinking, we have listening, we have multi-perspective, we have using various tools like art to transform pure facts into beliefs and actions. Johannes, very difficult task. What would you add?
I think there is still something to add, but I wouldn't say that one of these methods or of the instruments that we have is less important than the other. I think it must be somehow the mixture of all of these, because every person that we know is using different channels of informing themselves. Every person is different. The one is more visual one, seeing pictures and taking a lot of information. The other one hears a certain sound and takes information out of this. So I think we need to use all of them. I think actually, if I may say that once more in the end, that this project-based learning that you experienced is something that really fascinates me in a way, what is the outcome of this kind of project. But of course, I think we need to have, we need to take into account also new ways and new channels to reach people that have perhaps a lower span of attention, as you mentioned it in the beginning. And I think, for example, if I remember about this Instagram project, you may have noticed it as well, about this, the fate of a 13-year-old Jewish girl. Her name is Sophie Scholl, which reached hundreds of thousands of users on Instagram. And it was about the question, like, what would videos of a 13-year-old girl would look like if Instagram would have been there already in the 1930s, when the Nazi invasion came into different countries all over Europe.
You mean Anne Frank?
I think it was about Sophie Scholl, but I'm
No,
not sure. Perhaps it was also diaries about Anne Frank, but it was this project that got a lot of attention, and I think this was one possibility how to use new channels and the new social networks or anti-social networks or however we want to call them, but to use it to reach more people. But it's the question of like, do we take these kind of information, these kind of how to deal with the past just as another entertainment, or if we really take the right conclusions out of it? And I think that is really the question that always comes up if it's about the past. I think important is really this multiplier effect, that we find multiplicators that are spreading this word, that are spreading this information. Actually, the ENRS is using Instagram as well. And I like this project a lot, for example, which is about like on this day in, I don't know, 1937, if it's a certain historical event that is described in very small words, but like very clear, it's something I usually spread in my timeline as well. And like if we use multiplicators that are like in public, like a politician like me, we can spread the word to a lot of people, and they at least take into account these small messages, and they have heard of it at least once. But at the end, I think it's that art can do a lot also with the movie Im Westen nichts Neues. If you newly use new developments and try to spread also historical backgrounds in this way to the people. But at the end, it's all about like we need to know about history so that we can shape the present and the past and the future, of course. And that is the important thing. And I think what made me think about very much is the one sentence by this teacher, Tatiana Kryukowska. And she said that there might be some future politicians as participants in this project. To be honest, would be glad about it. But it's not just about politicians to shape the present and to shape the future. It's about all of us to spread the word, and it's not just about politicians. And I think it's important that we really have to value the fundamentals of our democracy. And if we do that, we don't do the same mistakes, and we really learn from history. But that's a question for all of us.
Thank you. And the final word is for Alexandra. Alexandra, take my question seriously. Our generation is still a little bit useful, but we want to, first of all, respect your needs and your perspective. So tell us, what do you want from us, older generations, in the field of historical education? And I will add one thing, and it's also not a joke. I hope that you will be the next Prime Minister or President of Hungary.
Better future. Perhaps the second next.
Maybe the second next. But seriously, 100%.
Okay, so what would be really great from older generations is to share their stories. Because like Dan mentioned in the film, he asked about his family's past, and he couldn't get an answer, and it was forbidden to ask these questions. But I think history learning starts at your family. So if you have any kind of stories, and not only about these big historical events, but from just smaller parts, when something life-changing for you happened, share that experience and that story, because it helps a lot for us to understand the current events and happenings. And like when we learn about history, which is not that far in the past, our grandparents might have some stories, but even in Hungary, for example, in my family, it is also forbidden to ask about the revolution in the 1950s, because I understand that it's a trauma for them, but I think it would be useful even for them to process this and share these things, because we can really learn a lot about this.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for panelists working in very difficult circumstances. They were marvelous.
Indeed.
Ciao.
And we lost a lot of time. I'm really sorry for difficult circumstances, but one question must be raised, please.
One or two. There's a second on the right.
Yes,
Or two questions, but very briefly, okay?
of course. Yes, first of all, thank you to the organizers for opening this space, as we saw the positive and negative effects of democracy today. But thank you for being so open here. Well, actually, she made two valid points, and this was also going to my direction of questions, so I apologize in advance for my questions, actually, to the organizers of this project we saw. And the first point is like the question of representation. Who can decide what is represented in such a project? And the second question is about the impact. Do projects like this allow space for professionalism? It was also discussed before. What is the future of those young people that you worked with? For the question of representation, well, unfortunately she's gone now, but I'm of Polish and German origin with Jewish roots, so I think I can say some things about it, but I will not do right now. And I just returned from Ukraine, where I did a cultural project there. And I also, unfortunately, this was not the first time in my life I experienced a state of war. I was also in Turkey doing cultural projects during the state of war and the military coup situation. So I have some kind of experience with that in my short life. But the main question is, okay, what is the impact of projects like this? And is there a sustainable impact for these young people that participated?
Thank you very much. I will address these questions to Dan, yes?
Yeah.
Yes, Dan, please. You heard all the questions?
Yeah, the cultural impact. I mean, again, I think what Tanya said in the film is the most important part for me, is that what happens if after these experiences, the empathy and the connection and the experience gives a flavor to a decision that a young person makes in the future. If someone becomes a politician or a teacher or an artist or is just a human being, how can these experiences shape how they think about their lives in the future? And I know you gave me the question, but I really think it's Alexandra's question. Like, how has she taken this into her life in the last year, and how can we sustain it? And the idea is always to have an open-ended invitation for all the young people. And we've had multiple young people write master's thesis on the project, come back. Alexandra drove from her city to Austria last year. I think it was over 10 hours to see the second edition's performance. So there's really like a sense of community that is built, and the community is open for them for always. And I think that people like you in the audience today can help us figure out, how do we create an alumni track, a way to keep these young people involved and to empower them as they move forward in their lives to become hopefully the first female or the second female president of our country, whatever. But I really think that this transformation is something that we see reflected back to us many, many times beyond the borders of the 8 days that we spent together at the project. And I would love to have more discussions about how do we sustain that? How do we engage them beyond the 8 days that they're there, so we really can continue to build democracy in a way that is fruitful and safe and peaceful and forward moving.
Thank you. The next question, please.
Very short, to Dan. I would like to know, when you choose the historical sites, do the historical sites have an influence in the creativity of the students? So as we saw in the film, you know, you chose with the House of the Wannsee Conference a typical perpetrator site, whereas in Lithuania, in Kaunas, at the 4-9, this is a typical killing site, Holocaust by bullets. And I question myself, does this have an effect or an influence in the creativity of the students? And how do you manage this? Because, you know, I think you are, you know, you reach us here far away in Germany as a very creative person, and we all can say, well, you must be very inspiring for the students. But the more it is the questions, you know, you are in a historical site where, you know, torments and exploitation in concentration camp was a part of everyday's life. And this is, I think, more a question of methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you for that question. First of all, I want to clarify as part of the process. So I act as the artistic director. My role is to help to collaborate with the other artists to develop not only the creative methodology that we use on site, but to help shape the final performance. ENRS has a very successful process of opening up applications for teachers. This is the first start. This is the first step. A teacher applies. 4 teachers from 4 different countries as part of the network are chosen. And from that point, students are chosen. I don't personally get to choose the locations, although we've had discussions in the past. And I think your question around the different results based on the location is very, very powerful to me, because a place like the House of the Wannsee Conference, which is a place of the perpetrators and was the first of its kind we did in the 12-year history of the project, was quite difficult, right? When you come to a place like Ravensbrück, when you come to Neuengamme, when you come to a place like where I'm sitting here, Jasenovac in Croatia, you know, there's a power. These are the places of the victims. Right? And the victims, I connect deeply with the victims because I'm on this earth because of this victimhood. I am the grandchildren of survivors. So the victims are their narratives, their stories, the sensitivity around them is very, very important. And yes, there is quite a big challenge that we have, because the artists, we have to put on a presentation at the end. We have to put on a performance at the end. But at the same time, we have to be very sensitive to the history of the place, to the realities of the place, to the cultures and the communities that exist surrounding us. We had a very challenging time in Austria last year, where we had students who wanted to be very harsh and very critical of the place, writing very harsh and critical poetry about the place. And the argument among the artists was really, who has the right to say what here? We're guests here. We can't just show up and tell them it, you know, say how wrong it is, da 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 da. But at the end, the discussion revolved around the fact that this young participant was from this community. And in doing so, we presented her poem both in English and in German. And this was the way that we could speak to the complexities of the location. In 2017, we went to Ravensbrück, and we were invited back for the next 3 years to work with their Generations Forum, where we worked with 4 survivors who were from this camp. And it changed our approach and our methodology, because no longer were we just living in the imaginative world of the place. You learn about the place, you learn the facts, and you have your images in your head and the movies and the pictures that run through your mind. That's one thing, when you sit in a room and everybody's having this experience. But when a survivor walks into the room, a real person who has had a real experience at this location, you have to be quite sensitive. You have to be quite nimble. And yes, the performance is completely determined by the location. We are not the kind of project where the audience comes and sits in a seat in a theater and has an experience where there's the art and here is the audience. We think of it more of a performative art installation where we literally move the audience around the location to all the places that the young people find most interesting, that the young people have written their poetry or their raps or made their dances or made their songs about. And we break what we call in the theater the fourth wall, the separation between artist and audience. Because we are all citizens, we are all human beings, and we all have responsibility in this history and in this story. And in doing this process and allowing the location to tell us how we present it, we really create this break, this conversation, whether it's through language or through movement, but a conversation between the young people who have experienced it and now the audience or the public who comes to play their role now, which is listeners, which is witnesses, which is not innocent bystanders, but active participants in this narrative of history.
Thank you, Dan. We are running horribly out of time, so Johannes, very brief.
I try to be brief. Actually, the sustainability of such projects, from my point of view, becomes obvious in the one sentence of the one participant in the movie who said that he said, "I'm much more grateful for what we have." And I think this expresses everything, because he makes the reflection that he doesn't have to take everything for granted that he has. He doesn't take it as self-evident. He values in the environment he's living in. And that is the basic fundament of supporting democracy. And if we just empower some people with that and they spread the word, this helps so much. I would like to tell you about sustainability, one thing that I experience as a member of parliament very often. If I have school classes visiting me in the parliamentary building here in Berlin, which has a very full history, let's call it that way, as well. If I show them around, I try to show them one place in the parliamentary building. You know that it's renovated by a British architect, Sir or Lord Norman Foster. And the other Allied forces wanted to add a piece of art in the parliamentary building as well. So the Americans, the Russians, and the French were allowed to add one piece of art to the parliamentary building. They were all about the basic fundamental freedoms that we have. One about piece of art, one about freedom of art, freedom of expression, and the third one, that was the French one, is about freedom of elections. And there is it looks like a brick wall, and it's one little box for every member of parliament that got elected in free and fair elections into that parliament building. And if you walk around, it starts in 1919, beginning of Weimar Republic, till 1933, when Hitler took power. Then there is a black box for the time where it was no free and fair elections, till 1949, and then further to 1999, when Bundestag moved back from Bonn to Berlin. And if you walk on this wall of boxes, you see the names on every box, with the name, the party, and the time that this person has spent in parliament. As closer you get to 1933, as more people are there, with the names Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, all these guys have a box there. There was a huge discussion about why these people should be honored with this own boxes in this piece of art. The French artist said that this is also German history, that people that demolished democracy, that undermined democracy from inside, were elected in elections in this parliamentary building. They never had their own majority, but they got the support from others. And then there was this black box where there were no free and fair elections. Whenever I walk there with school classes, they make the connection to today. And they say, oh, there are people in our parliaments as well that want to undermine our democratic values. And that is the learning. And I think that is what shows the best what is sustainable in supporting democracy. Sorry, I really had to add that in this point.
Thank you. I should stop by now, but the last voice is from Rafał Rogulski, so I have no choice.
Only one sentence. It is a part of the answer for your question, because this is very multi-level project, and the outcome is also quite multi-level. And the the knowledge of history is also a part of outcomes. We use art, we use this possibility to invite young people to the place where the history took place, to teach them history, to live them out with all emotions, all new friends, all this network of people whom they had met. But we leave them also with the knowledge about history and hope that they will be interested in history in the future. This is the most important outcome for us as a network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end with a short story, which will unite us all. It's a very shameful story for me, but it's touching your question, very important question. The question for direct outcome of historical education, of such projects. It is really shameful for me because I'm dealing with these topics for over 20 years. And 2 months ago, during similar conference, where I was an expert, someone asked me, and in your case, in your life, was there a situation that history helped you to find proper solution directly? Oh my God. Tough question. I started to think, okay, I'm sure it made me better citizen. It made me better human being. But direct example, and I had only one. It was on the 25th of February last year, one day before the war in Ukraine started. Masses of people fleeing from Ukraine to Poland. In the evening, the kids were already asleep. My wife asked me, "You saw Facebook? So many people are seeking refuge in Warsaw. What should we do?" And we started to discuss the thing. We have 3 children. Our daughter was preparing for very difficult exams. We have only 1 bathroom. We don't know these people. Just open the doors for strangers. It was a long discussion, and during this discussion, I had a look on the bookshelf, and I saw the books by my mentor, Władysław Bartoszewski. He was righteous among nations, 2 times foreign minister in Poland, very important person for building bridges and German-Polish reconciliation. Very important person for me. I took a short look on this bookshelf and I told my wife, you know, Władysław Bartoszewski was hiding Jews in the occupied Warsaw for 2 years. And we are talking about 1 bathroom. Let's do it. And we had refugees from Ukraine at our home for 4 months, elderly, adults, youngsters, also babies, and even 1 cat from Ukraine. And you know what was the most important thing? For my children, it was the best school of democracy, tolerance, solidarity, etc. They were extremely happy and proud that they had to live in 1 room for 4 months together. And my daughter, she's 15. She told me, oh my God, for the first time in my life, I took part in history. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And a round of applause for our panelists.